It was a cool December evening in 1976 when 66-year-old Marjorie Wilson joined her husband and friends for a quiet dinner at the Lake Monroe Inn in Sanford, Florida. They had just been served their meals, but when Marjorie's shrimp arrived, she barely touched it. She leaned forward to her husband, Robert.
Robert, I don't feel well.
Concerned, Robert walked her to their car, a bright yellow 1973 Chevrolet Impala. He turned the heat on, tucked her inside. But when Robert came back, just 15 minutes later, his heart dropped. The car was gone, and so was Marjorie. At first, a small, rational voice told him she must have felt better, driven the car home. But that thought was drowned out by a growing dread. He had to wait more than an hour for a taxi. The silence of their Deltona home confirmed his worst fears. The house was dark. The Impala wasn't in the driveway. Marjorie would never be seen again, and neither would the Chevrolet. Investigators learned another vehicle in the inn's parking lot had been sideswiped that night, a small detail that pointed to a terrible possibility. Was this Marjorie, disoriented and sick? Her husband said no. She was a careful driver. If the Impala had been behind the wheel of destruction, then someone else must have been driving it. Theory swirled. The dark waters of Lake Monroe loomed nearby. The divers searched. The lake was too shallow to conceal such a car. No wreckage, no glass, no trace of Marjorie. Weeks earlier, in the very same parking lot, a hooded man had abducted two patrons at gunpoint, forcing them into their vehicles and robbing them. Could he, or someone like him, have been waiting in the shadows? But what we're left with is simply this. Marjorie Wilson vanished into a December night nearly half a century ago. A woman, a wife, a friend. Swallowed not by time, nor by the water, but by mystery itself. On June 26, 1977, on his 20th birthday, John Clifton Ballenger stepped into the glow of the Satellite Beach movie theater, ready for what should have been just an ordinary night. He was with friends, out on a double date. And like millions across America that summer, they were there to see Star Wars. For most of the evening, everything was normal. Partway through the movie, John excused himself. He slipped out of his seat, whispered something about the bathroom, and vanished into the shadows. He never returned, not to his family, not to his friends, not to his life. John was carrying only about $15 in his pocket that night. No car, no plan. Nothing to suggest he was ready to walk away forever. But his life, like so many young men of that era, it wasn't simple. He had been struggling, out of work, drinking a little too much, using some illicit substances. Shadows were gathering around him, and maybe they were closing in. Not long before his disappearance, two of John's closest friends had been badly beaten. They lived nearby, and whispers were suggesting that maybe they'd been caught up in the local drug trade. Whether that violence reached John or whether it merely circled around him like a storm he just couldn't escape, well, we may never know the answer to that one. Police found no proof of abduction, no signs of foul play. Some said maybe he chose to disappear. After all, when he was 16, John had run away for 3 weeks. He was found safe, but this time, this seemed so much different. This time, he never came back. What lingers is a cruel silence. A young man left his seat in a darkened movie theater and was swallowed whole by the night. 12 years later, the courts declared John Clifton Ballenger legally dead. But no grave has ever held him. No truth has ever surfaced. And somewhere between the Florida shoreline and the echo of the projector reel, the story remains unfinished, unsolved, and deeply haunting.
Welcome to BucklesBerry Lemonade. Tonight, unravel the mystery with us. A tale of sun and shadow, hope and heartbreak. We begin not in the past, but in the present, with a memory that refuses to fade.
Imagine a phone ringing in the night. Susan, Amy's mother, listens, holds her breath, the way she did for decades. Every ring could be Amy. Every ring could be a lie.
On March 5th, 1974, Amy went home for lunch and called her father, Ned, to borrow some money. Her plan was simple. Walk the less than a mile from her residence to Ned's art gallery on Commodore Plaza. She never made it.
Amy was wearing a short denim miniskirt and cork platform sandals. The time of her disappearance was midday, around 12 p.m. Witnesses, well, they offered conflicting reports, which is typical in chaos. One saw her enter a light-colored pickup truck. Another, well, they said a light-colored Jeep. And a third suggested a beige van. None of these leads amounted to anything concrete.
But the first true sign that this was not a simple runaway case was the immediate menace that followed. Within days, her family received an extortion call demanding $30,000.
That specific threat turned out to be a cruel hoax placed by 2 twin brothers, the Glassers. They were swiftly arrested, but this initial red herring, well, it only obscured the very real danger that Amy had encountered. 2 weeks after Amy vanished, a hitchhiking college student found a small personal item in the grass beside the Florida Turnpike, over 250 miles northwest of Miami. It was Amy's camera.
The camera contained a few underdeveloped photos, one of a light-colored pickup and another showing a white van. But the most chilling theory, one that Susan Billig, Amy's mother, would spend the rest of her life chasing, was the connection to a notorious motorcycle gang known as the Outlaws.
Police quickly learned a large contingent of outlaws had passed through Coconut Grove around the time that Amy disappeared. This theory gained horrific traction when Susan met 2 gang members who confessed that, yes, members of their organization routinely kidnapped young women, sometimes selling them for nothing more than a bike or a credit card.
Susan became an avenging force. She relentlessly pursued every single lead. In 1976, she met a biker named Dave, who claimed he had actually owned Amy at one point. He showed Susan a terrible validating clue. He described a hidden appendectomy scar on Amy's abdomen, a detail that the family had never released to the media.
He described Amy as quiet, almost mute. This detail became an identifier, followed by multiple witnesses in different states. But despite Dave's promises to lead Susan to Amy in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the meeting was a bust. It ended in a barroom fight and Dave vanishing.
Susan's search spanned 3 decades, stretching from Florida to Seattle, Washington. But the darkest, most horrifying piece of information surfaced years later, long after the supposed biker responsible, Paul Branch, had died in 1996.
Branch's common law wife came forward with a deathbed confession. Branch was able to describe Amy's scar, confirming he knew her. But the rest of his revelation was brutal, terrifying. He claimed that Amy had been taken to a party and had become involved in an act of unspeakable group violence and forced intoxication.
The confession alleged that, in the frenzy, Amy became unresponsive. Branch's final words on the matter claimed that her body was disposed of in a way that ensured no trace would ever be found, swallowed by the wildest, most desolate part of the Florida ecosystem. This account offered a gruesome closure, though one investigators were never able to definitively prove or disprove.
As if Susan Billing hadn't endured enough, she spent 21 years being tormented by an anonymous man who called her repeatedly, claiming her daughter was held against her will by an illicit ring. He was always elusive, always using payphones, until he made that one fatal mistake in 1995. He used a cell phone.
The number led police to a U.S. Customs agent named Henry Johnson Blair, the man who tormented Susan for 2 decades. He was arrested. Blair claimed he was merely an alcoholic with an obsessive compulsive disorder and maintained he had no connection to Amy's disappearance. Wow.
But Susan, she was still searching for the truth. She found a chilling entry in Amy's old journal, written just 6 weeks before she vanished. Amy wrote,
Hank says as soon as I finish school, he wants me to go to South America with him. I told him he's crazy.
Hank was Henry Blair's nickname. Blair was a sky marshal until 1973, and his customs job often involved patrolling local waterways and driving seized vehicles, including, according to his neighbors, a light-colored pickup truck and a beat-up beige van, matching those vague witness descriptions from 1974.
Blair was convicted of harassment and lost a civil suit, but he was never charged with Amy's kidnapping or murder. The ultimate irony of this case is that the two key individuals, the biker Paul Branch, the harasser Henry Blair, or Hank, both had access to information only an involved person would know: the scar, the nickname, travel details. Yet the definitive truth remains trapped in the silence of 1974.
Amy's parents, Ned and Susan, spent the rest of their lives searching. They passed away without ever knowing where Amy rests. Today, Amy Billig is remembered not just as a missing person, but as a victim whose promise was stolen, and whose tragic story is a testament to a mother's relentless 31-year war for answers.
The year was 1981. The location was a lonely stretch of water in Moorhaven, Florida. It was here, on a bleak March day, that a body surfaced, face down in the canal. She was a ghost from the moment she was found, unrecognizable, unnamed. No missing person report matched her description. The local authorities, well, they had no choice. They buried her under an arbitrary marker, an alias that would serve as a name, but not a truth. Nicole Michelle Emmons. She was a Jane Doe, swallowed whole by the enmity of the water. But the story didn't begin by the canal. Her story begins 2 months earlier, 200 miles south in Miami, on Valentine's Day. 16-year-old Nicki Virginia Lee Elkins walked away from her family member's home. She carried a single suitcase, the kind a teenager packs when she's determined to make a point or to flee a place that no longer feels safe. She was searching for escape, but her steps that night led her right toward betrayal. The devastating silence in Nicki's case began immediately. She wasn't reported missing until April 16th, 2 long months after she had vanished. 2 critical months of lost leads, forgotten conversations, and cold trails. And tragically, 2 months after her body had already been found in that canal. The distance between the living who were searching and the dead who were waiting, well, that was immense. In the weeks leading up to her death, there were desperate whispers of her life, sightings of a girl matching her description at Uncle Joe's fish camp or a bar in Clewiston. A teenager far from home, living under a mysterious alias. Was she lured there? Was the name Nicole Michelle Emmons a shield she chose? Or a new identity forced upon her by someone who was trying to control her? Investigators, they also fielded rumors that she was seen in Naples before her body found its final, tragic resting place in that canal. Every clue was a frustrating dead end, every sighting just a shadow. The truth of Nicki's short life was tangled with secrets way too complex for 1981 investigators to untangle. And so the shadows deepened. For nearly 4 decades, her mother lived without knowing where her daughter was, without the comfort of even a grave to visit. But thanks to modern forensic genealogy and DNA technology, well, that linked Jane Doe from that canal to the name Nicki Virginia Lee Elkins. And after 39 years, her identity, her dignity, they were restored. Her remains were given back to her family. But the story doesn't end with the name. Nicki's death remains unsolved. Someone out there knows what happened to her in those missing weeks in 1981. The arguments, the travel, the person she trusted enough to carry her away from Miami. Nicki wasn't just a Jane Doe. She was a daughter, a young woman who deserved more than silence and shadows. She deserved safety. She deserved a future. Her name is Nicki Virginia Lee Elkins, and the ending to her tragic, complex story still waits to be told.